Oh yeah.
Thing that I was nervous about, but I talked to a technician, and he was like, "You'll want these on. It makes a big difference."
Yeah, the equipment makes a huge difference.
I talked to a technician who actually like sets stuff up like this, and he basically just put together like a laundry list for me, and it was. I was like, man, this is pricey, but
That makes it a lot easier though.
yeah, and you know what? I'm so glad that I did it because I see some of the other podcasts that are on, and I see the quality that it produces. And at the end of the day, the one thing that I think is, I never noticed it before, but when you see a lot of these videos, you kind of go, "Oh, okay, well, that's cool," and then you kind of judge it on the content. But then once you like, I'm doing some of the like raw editing and everything,
Hmm.
and I can hear the voices and I can see the like camera quality, and I notice a lot of people are like, "Oh, that was a really good video," and people who don't do it, they're like, "Yeah, that video was better than that one," and I'm
Yeah,
like,
it
"Well,
makes
why
a
do you think it
difference.
is?" And a lot of people are like, "I don't know, it just this one just seems a little better," and it's like a mind trick. You like the video better. You don't know really why until you really think about it. So if you're just watching a quick 35, 40-minute or 40-second clip, if it's really high quality and the audio is good, people notice it.
Yeah,
So,
of course they do, because people are just downloading this stuff insatiably, right? So
yeah,
and watching it and consuming it, so they know the difference.
right. So
Yep.
we'll kick it off. We've got Jimmy or James Evans.
Jimmy Evans.
There we go.
Yep.
Evans Law Firm.
Evans Family Law Group is the official name. Just like my official name is James W. Evans, but
Okay.
my mom and everybody called me Jimmy growing up, and it just stuck. So I've been going by Jimmy ever since. So
Well, I appreciate you being on. I mean, at the end of
yeah,
the day, it's as a loan originator, it's always kind of difficult to get in front of family law attorneys. You guys are busy, and then furthermore, it's like, we want to be there in the event of, unfortunately, when people decide they want to split assets and stuff like that. That's where I unfortunately sometimes come in, and
it's a super helpful service, as people in your audience may find out as part of this conversation between you and me. But we've known each other
right,
professionally. We've referred things to each other. You've handled things for me personally, and I've
right,
referred clients to you and got nothing but positive feedback. And I always tell people I don't get anything out of it. There's
right.
no commissions, no kickbacks, just really good professional service. So it's good to participate in and talk about what we do, and how the two worlds can converge and complement each other. So I'm
Sure.
happy to be here. Thanks.
So, just for the audience and everything, is there anything outside of family law that you are expanding into, or is it mainly just family law?
You mean business wise?
Right. Yeah.
No, primarily family law. That's what I've been doing the last 24 years. It's what I know. I'm
Right.
expert in it, and it's if anything, it's time to invest more in my family and spend time with family than anything.
Sure. You don't
After
want anybody calling you up because they got a DUI or something like that.
Yeah, our practice is exclusively on family law, and a lot of people ask what that is. And in summary, it's complex divorce, whether it involves property. We deal with a lot of high asset, complex asset division stuff. We also deal with, and probably our specialty really is in the custody matters, and I hate to say it, but the messier probably
Right.
the better we are in terms of our expertise. And messier can be anything from family violence to substance abuse to mental health issues, which is very, very relevant these days and
Mm-hmm.
very present. I had no idea when I first started in family law and dealing with custody matters just how real mental health issues really are. There's the good kind, there's the bad kind, and but we can have a whole topic on that. But I do a lot of prenuptial agreements and
Okay.
a lot of postnuptial agreement drafting, which can kind of affect your world.
Right.
And we do a lot of adoptions. So those are fun things in family law. We deal with protective orders in helping people and victims of family violence or in defending those allegations. Not all those allegations are always true,
Sure.
and there's both sides of that. But that's the primary. If I was summarizing the topics of our practice, that's the primary areas that we focus on.
I gotcha. And so I think one of the big questions that I have, not personally, but I know that I would love for my audience to know as a lender, when, hypothetically, if I'm married and things just aren't working out, when is typically the best time to reach out to you?
Man, that's a complex question, and to be honest with you, or probably not honest, but to be frank about it,
Mm-hmm.
the sooner the better.
Right.
I do.
Why is that?
I came up with a concept that I call ghosting, and it's perfectly fine to reveal that here because nobody knows when I'm ghosting for someone.
Okay.
But ghosting is a concept where I'm not officially representing someone in the public. Like We don't sign a contract for representation. We don't file something in the courts. We don't send out letters.
Hmm.
Nothing public. No one knows. We set it up and structure it in a way that I won't reveal here, where uh, retainers are paid in a way that's not connected or tied to that person.
Okay.
The idea being that there, and it's usually a smaller retainer. It's usually in the 25, 3,500 range ish. But the idea is that you have someone like me who's an expert in those matters,
Right.
coaching you,
Okay.
for lack of a better phrase, because you don't really. I always tell people who try to come to my or who are in my office looking for consultation, it's very difficult if you're not ready to proceed in divorce, how to give advice, because the landscape legally can be completely different from the next day to the next month to a year from now,
Right.
from the time that they decide to go ahead and start that proceeding. So it's really, really difficult to give actual advice. And I pride myself on giving people detailed strategy. Like, okay, if we're going to start, this is what we're going to do. Here's all the ways we're going to do it, and here's why. And it's really difficult if you're not ready to proceed. So the ghosting concept, to answer your
Yeah.
question, is the idea that, look, I'm really contemplating this. I don't know what the timing. I'm scared. I don't know
Yeah.
what's going to happen. And it could be anything from the high wage earner. It could be to a stay at home mom, and I mean, anything in between. And maybe there's kids, maybe there's not. But the idea being just somebody's there to answer questions as you're going through the process. And I hate to say how to manipulate things, but sometimes it's how to manipulate things
Right.
to help you or to improve legally by the time your circumstances, by the time you actually start the process. And sometimes it's just information. Information is key to alleviate that anxiety.
Right.
Because sometimes the information's not what they want to hear, but even that is helpful in alleviating anxiety. And sometimes the information is exactly what they need and want to hear. And so that ghosting is something that I think is the answer to your question. And
Correct.
it
Yeah.
really is just a matter of, can you afford it or do you want to afford it? Because I know we cost money. But if you're really contemplating separation or divorce, and you don't know the timing, but like it's probably going to happen,
Hmm.
like on a scale of 1 to 10, you're like a 6, that it's actually going to happen. Ghosting is probably the way to do that, and sooner than later is better.
Well, yeah, most people, I mean, you mentioned scared, and most people just don't know, right? I mean, let's face it. For the average person, I would envision divorce as maybe a once or sometimes twice in a lifetime thing. I know there's some out
Yeah.
there that have maybe experienced it more than that, but
And to add to that, probably if you're in a situation where it's out of character for someone or a couple to start moving things around asset wise, like if you have a small business or you start and it's out of character, but suddenly we're selling real estate or
hmm.
we're moving assets around or selling off things or something, and the relationship's not in the right place.
Yeah,
Those are probably signs or signals, smoke signals, that it's probably a good idea to consult with someone like me. And those may be exactly the right thing for your family and your small business.
hmm.
But in divorce, if they're not, those things can be stopped. And legally, you can put your arms around those things and get control over them. And that may be the right thing, may not be, but that's what the ghosting is all about, is to
Sure.
answer those questions, like on timing and whether or not those transactions should happen or not happen, and, et cetera. So,
Yeah, no, I get it. I mean, here's one for you that you just if you could give me like a blanketed answer. I'm sure you don't have an exact answer, but the amount of people that connect with you as far as the ghosting is concerned, what percentage of them would you say actually end up pulling the trigger?
divorcing or whatever,
Yeah,
most of them.
right.
Most of them, because you're not contacting and paying someone like us if you're not really contemplating doing that. And there's various reasons.
I mean,
And
is it all? It,
you know,
it can't be all, right?
no,
There has to.
definitely not
Okay.
all. Yeah, a lot of people. There's definitely a good percentage of people that don't. They
Hmm.
reconcile, and and that's a secret that we keep
Right.
forever. And I don't acknowledge them in public if I
Right.
see them out in the restaurant
Sure.
or the golf course or park or whatever. And because I made that mistake about 20 years ago and acknowledged someone, and I heard them as I walked away, and they go, "Who's that? How do you know that person?" And I
Yeah.
and so so ghosting is truly ghosting.
Right on.
No one knows. There's not a footprint at all.
Another one I've got for you is, and I kind of have my own answer to this just because I experience this from time to time. How many divorce situations that you come across that, they decide this is what they're going to do, start amicable and end maybe not ugly, but not as amicable as once, thought in the beginning?
Yeah, that's a really good topic and probably a whole nother show because we have a service in my office that I call Agreed Divorces.
Hmm.
And I own that website, agreeddivorces.com. And it's a really unique approach to divorce.
Hmm.
And the answer to your question is very, very few that start out in that package, if you will, in that
Yep.
box of agreed divorces actually end up not amicable.
Right.
And that's because of the way I approach it or we approach it. And that's a different topic and a different question or subject matter. But
Well, we've got the time,
there's
man.
a different category of divorce where
Okay.
people come and they think, and it's not what we call an agreed divorce,
Uh-huh.
but they're amicable. They're
Sure.
getting along, but they have issues that they can't resolve and whatnot. And there's attorneys on both sides, and and I would say the vast majority of those, for cost, anxiety, lots of different reasons, those end up resolving amicably. It doesn't mean it's fun,
Right.
but they end up resolving by agreement and what I would call amicable, meaning you're not going to court and cutting each other up through litigation and all that, kind of a thing. So.
Yeah, the reason I asked is because, for my side of it, I would say, if 10 people were to connect with me and say, "Hey, everything's we're splitting up. We've got a home. We need to refinance. Everything's great. It should be really smooth." I would say 80% of those, we get to the point where everything's moving forward, and then I get, "Oh, well, we have to put some things on hold. We're not seeing eye to eye on a bunch of issues."
Yeah.
And that's not to tease or say I told you so to anyone, but the reason why I wanted, I had you on and creating this podcast is one of the things that we've identified in my business and in all businesses is that people really they want to troll us first, right? They don't necessarily want to contact you right away and start asking a bunch of questions. They kind of want to get some of the broad stroke questions answered if they can through media. And so I just feel like public service announcement to those of you out there, if you feel like that divorce is going to be amicable, I hope for your sake
Of
that is the
course.
case. I mean, I
Yeah.
want that for you. But I definitely would tell anybody, prepare for the strong possibility that there's going to be some hangups.
Yeah, probably the corollary to that is that I call it the shadow verse is what you're talking about. And when I
Uh-huh.
explain to clients, the shadow verse is the information you're getting from someone not an expert in this field.
Right.
And that's social media, Google, at these days the artificial intelligence stuff, chatbots and
Right.
whatever. And I find, even as much information as there is out there on that, I find that probably 7 out of 10, if not 8 out of 10 times, that causes more anxiety
Right.
and ends up causing more problems than if someone would just call me in a 10-minute conversation and just put that issue to bed. The
Yeah.
other shadow verse that causes that kind of is others' experience. Like in my
Yep.
world, there's so many people
I call
touched.
it water cooler talk.
Exactly, that's what it is. Where
Right.
they're sitting around having drinks or whatever, happy hour or the water cooler, and they're talking about how miserable their experience
Right.
was and how on edge they are and about this and that and it really can cause problems when people are absorbing that information. I really try to encourage clients in that situation just text or call, and I mean, because in a 10-15 minute conversation I can really put that to bed. I mean, I can tell you, yeah, that's legit.
Right.
Yeah, you need to worry about that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or no, that's not. That's their experience. That's not what we're dealing with. This is very, very different. Even if it feels the same, it's very, very different.
Sure, sure. I know you mentioned that a lot of the work that you do involve, you kind of gave a list of it. What, from a divorce situation, what do you feel in terms of kind of percentages, if you will, that you're dealing with personally, not in general in family law, but that involve children? In other words, couples that have children, is that the bulk of it? Is that 50% of it? Opposed to couples that obviously don't have any kind of children involved.
Well, in my business in particular, that's the bulk of our
Hmm.
representation. Our clients, they have kids involved, whether it's a divorce or a couple that's not married and they're just dealing with custody issues. That's definitely the bulk of what we deal with, and it's a range from parents who just had a child and it's an infant all the way up to kids that are in their teens and getting close to high school graduation and everything in
Right.
between. and we deal with kids of special needs. I mean, that's kind of a special subspecialty area that a lot of
I didn't even
family
think
law
of that.
attorneys don't deal with that,
Yeah.
because there's a lot of details that you have to think about, when you've got kiddos, and there's all kinds of different special needs between,
Sure.
there's ranges of kids on the spectrum to kids with physical disabilities to illnesses to mental health, and there's just so many different ranges. And I don't mean ADHD,
Right,
you
right.
know.
No, I mean, honestly, I didn't even think of that, but I can
So
see the complexity and how that can become.
and it gets super complex when you have a parent that has those mental health issues,
Hmm.
because there's flashes of that's my dad or my mom, whatever, and that's the dad that I know and love, but this mental health stuff can really take over, and then there's the flashes of that's not that person at all, and it's a really, really challenging thing to deal with, and so. But anyway, yeah, the answer to your question is the bulk of what we deal with involves kids.
Okay. And then as far as the what I would, for lack of a better term, call sticking points, is children seem to be the biggest sticking point, or is it the money? Is it the new, the new girlfriend? What seems to be the
All
big,
that,
well, but what
all
seems
of
to
it.
hit the
Yeah.
number one spot?
All of that.
Yeah.
I mean, I know you're looking for a specific answer,
Well,
but
if
it's
there is one.
it's all of that. I mean, oftentimes a new partner is a problem. They and there's lots of different reasons why. Sometimes it's the money because somebody like maybe someone's been a stay-at-home mom and they're divorcing after 20 years or whatever, or 15 years,
Mm-hmm.
and they don't have that many assets. Like they've been living on their
Sure.
money or their income, and so they have a nice lifestyle, but not a lot of retirement or stock or cash. Those are really difficult situations, and so money can definitely be that. And back to your topic a while ago about people being prepared for the shoe to drop, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
I mean that's something. It's very good to be aware of those possibilities. I call it the lull in my office, where
Right.
people are getting lulled into, oh, this is going very smoothly. They start having private discussions without involving us, and they start creating promises or what I call the anchors of terms of agreements that it's fine if you wanted to do that, but it's the way in which it's being done. Maybe there's tax consequences that they don't think about,
Yeah.
or there's complexities because we've dealt with the briar patch consequences of going in that direction. And it can really cause problems because by the time you come back to us and say, oh, we've worked all this out, and we start dismantling that and saying, wait, this problem or that problem or what about this? And they start saying, well, I didn't think about all that.
Right.
And it really causes problems because at that point, if we're dismantling it for legitimate reasons, I mean, not just to say, what are you doing? Um, they've now made these promises to their partner or their spouse or whatever that these are the terms, and it's a really complex problem, a wedge,
Right.
to be in. And so it's very good, even if you're feeling things are amicable and you're moving in the right direction, like you said, to just plan around those possibilities and be vigilant, at
Yeah.
all times, and just be aware and look for those signs, and a professional like myself, yourself in your industry, can tell you, this is these are the signs that these are red flags,
Well,
you
you
know.
mentioned a couple things when you just talked about that. One of them was having conversations outside without having you involved, and then you're mentioning pre-planning. One of the questions I ask everyone who is on this is, you know, in this time, not broad stroke in your entire career, but right now, keeping it relevant, if you will. Is there something that if you could just make a public service announcement to your clients, a mistake that they make and they come to you and you're like, gosh, I wish you wouldn't have done that. I wish, you would have consulted me first. Is there anything that you kind of would say, hey guys, if this happens, then that?
Well, probably the number one thing, and it's a generalized statement, but in creating what I'm going to call artificial conflict,
Okay.
it's where people, and these are examples that I don't know if people will connect the two without a longer discussion, but some people will repeatedly call CPS. Some people will call law enforcement,
CPS being
Child Protective
right.
Services,
I know,
right?
but
Oh,
yeah.
yeah. And or the police.
Uh huh.
Some people will just in their social media, they start posting things or in texts or email, not realizing all you're doing is creating an evidence trail that a judge is going to read that.
Mm-hmm.
And in the moment, so I always tell clients, just like I've told my kids in this age of social media, my kids are now 17 and 18, like, you don't have to hit send.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't, I mean, you can type it,
Sure.
but you might want to send that to yourself, or you might be, because in my world, the mantra is, if you don't want a judge to see that, don't send it.
Mm-hmm.
And 9 times out of 10, that old saying of, stay the high road is much better, even if you're right in your frustration or in whatever the issue is that you're dealing with. And a lot of times, like the common situation is we're entering into this process and someone's withholding their kiddo,
Yeah.
and we're not in court yet. And for lots of different legal reasons, which I could explain, there's not a lot I can do about it, until we actually get in front of a judge,
Sure.
and that's the situation where it can really drive the other parent mad. And,
Mm-hmm.
and they, out of pure frustration and good motives, they say the wrong things, they do exactly the wrong thing. And then we're about to go into court, say 4 or 5 weeks later on a hearing to try to address it all, but out of frustration, they've just really set themselves up in the wrong way. And so,
Well, and all of those
you know,
things, I mean, let's face it, in this day and age with social media and text messaging, I mean, a lot of things can be taken out of context. I
yeah,
can't tell you how many text messages I've read, and I think about this internally with my employees, right, where we have a very open relationship with the way that we can speak to each other. And I've seen things in emails where I look at it initially and I'm like, you got to be kidding me. And I pick up the phone, you're right, instead of just going back and forth. And I pick up the phone and come to find that, like, I'm reading this email completely wrong. The situation that I think is going on is completely different. And it would have been very easy for me to just kind of be like, well, this isn't going to happen. We're not doing it this way.
yeah.
And sometimes just having that conversation. So having that evidence of social media or email or anything along those lines that can, again, very much so be taken out of context, that I could see how that,
Yeah,
that can hurt you more than help you.
and it may be somewhat counterintuitive, but I call it where the age of adversarialness, right? Like as soon as this topic comes up between people, like your gut feels that way,
Yep.
your butt flexes,
Oh,
and
yeah.
people start, your temples get tight, and it's an automatic experience internally of adversarialness. This is now my enemy.
Sure.
And I have a lot of trial experience. I've done, I've probably tried or been in hearings around just about every subject you can imagine in family law. And one thing I've learned is that old phrase of "there's just another way to skin the cat," is very, very true. And there's a lot of creative ways that while I'm ghosting you, or whatever, that you can do things before we enter that legal phase that can really optimize your chances of a better outcome if you'll just chill.
Stay calm.
Stay calm, don't panic. Panic causes you to drown. I'm a diver, right? That's the
Yep.
first rule. Don't panic. And if you'll talk to someone like myself, and it doesn't have to be me, but an expert in it, it's quite costly. And I've been very successful, I'll admit that to the camera, in working with people behind the scenes, especially dads of younger kids, in helping them create circumstances by being nice.
Yeah.
By taking the high road, even if you are absolutely right that mom is being completely overprotective, ridiculous, and has completely or is making complete unfounded allegations about you. Just because what you're really worried about is when we get to court, what do you want it to look like?
Yeah.
And and so that's another probably a word of caution. Just sometimes you need to take a step back, don't react. Think your way through it. And it's really hard for clients, but I tell a lot of clients in that situation that it's my job to help you start thinking strategically
Mm-hmm.
and not thinking emotionally, which is, I don't live their world, and so it's easy for me to say because I'm the professional. I'm looking at it objectively.
Well, it's interesting
so-
because in relation to my business, when I run into it, is we have situations. A lot of times, it's almost always with cable companies and with cell phone companies where a client, enters into a contract with a cell phone company or a cable company, and for one reason or another, either they don't think they're getting the service they want, or their cell phone breaks, and they try to negotiate something, and at the end of the day, they're like, you know what, forget it, I'm not paying you.
Right.
And then they contact me to buy a house like 2 years later, right? And their credit's not as good as they think it should be,
Right.
because we've got like a $500 collection from a cell phone company, and they immediately tell me the story. And I go, let me just stop you. You're probably right, right? Kind of like
Probably
what you're
are.
saying.
Yeah.
You are probably in the right. However, if I asked you, hey, for $500, we can increase your score by 100 points, would you do it? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, just pay them, man. Like,
Yeah.
do you want to be right, or do you want to have good credit? Because in the long run,
Yeah.
strategically, the amount of money you're going to pay on your $500,000 loan is pennies compared to paying $500. And it's like, look, if you want to hear it, I'll tell you. You're right. Like,
No,
who cares? Like,
that is a very good analogy, even though they're completely different.
right.
They're apples and oranges, but the synergy of those two are exactly right. Because you can get into situations where a good example is where if the goal is to create separation,
Mm-hmm.
and whether it's husband or wife or whatever, if strategically the goal is to create separation, because for whatever reason, strategically for your case, it's a good idea for that person to be out of the home, and there's lots of reasons for that.
Sure.
But sometimes people just get mad and they won't help them move. And so I
Right.
say this, I have that same conversation. Like, look, here's what's going to happen. Here's how much it's going to cost you. I mean, just pay the damn moving company.
Yeah.
Sign the lease. I'm not co-signing that lease. Co-sign the lease. For 6 to 12 months. This process is probably going to take 6 to 12 months anyway. Because look, here's on the flip side, if that person's out by agreement, here's the benefits. And so it's the same thing.
Yeah.
But but the concept is but the point, it remains the same. Just sit back, stop, think your way through it, and don't react emotionally in situations like that, because you can really, that tinderbox could just go up
Yep.
in flames, and then you can't really recover from that.
So look at the big
So,
picture.
see the big picture, and it's hard, but if anything, I would say learn from someone like me to think strategically,
Sure.
and react strategically as opposed to, from emotion.
No, I love it. To shift gears a little bit, because I always try to keep this, we want to talk about your business. We want to talk about, some of the things that you're seeing. But I also like to acknowledge the fact that everyone that I have on here, from real estate agents, insurance agents, CPAs, family law, we're all basically self-employed business owners.
Yeah.
And so with that being said, I try to touch a little bit on some of the things that you're doing as far as your business is concerned, one of them being generating new business. Now, I know you have been doing this for quite a long time. How long have you been practicing family law?
Family law exclusively now for probably right at 14 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I would envision the answer to my question, which I'll bring up here in a moment, is that a lot of what you do is through repeat clients or word of mouth and stuff like that. But as far as, generating new business, is there anything that you're doing real time right now that you feel is helping you grow your business?
Yeah, I think it's probably one of the things that distinguishes my firm from others, and it may sound completely cheesy or trite or whatnot, but I think it's in the way that we touch people.
Okay.
From the first moment they call our firm, the folks that answer our phones are not just, these are educated people
Mm-hmm.
who probably have, because I can't disclose things, but have probably been through those experiences themselves,
Sure.
and they can actually have dialogue with these folks. And so you're not just talking to a receptionist, like a 20-year-old college somebody.
Right.
With no experience in life and whatnot. So from the very first moment that you contact the firm, you should feel like this person knows and can identify what I'm going through. You actually get real information. Even if we can't help you, they're referring you to resources or other places that can hopefully help you. And then from there, when we schedule, and typically we try to get people on the phone with an attorney very quickly, or in front of an attorney in my office. And 80% of the time, that's me
Mm-hmm.
personally. And I tend to pride myself when I meet with that person for an hour, or sometimes a little more than an hour, like I was saying a while ago, that we have a very detailed discussion about the strategy of your case, why that strategy makes sense, why I have the experience to implement that strategy. And it makes people feel much better.
Well, that's
you know?
interesting because
I mean,
it,
the emotion just
yeah.
kind of,
Well,
oh,
it's that
okay,
initial
you know?
touch, and it's something I think about, and I know like most business owners, and you've really got me thinking personally because I'm typically the one that is, the referral comes to me, I'm
Mhm.
picking up the phone, I'm having that conversation, and I'll be the first to admit it. Sometimes I'm in the middle of like four different things. And it's, I try my very best to be, in tune and really listen and do all of the things. I know how important it is. We all do, right? As business owners, I don't think anybody would hear what you just said and go, well, that doesn't make any sense.
Right,
It's almost like a no duh, no shit moment.
right.
But I love the idea and the thought of having like a designated individual that's kind of almost, ready to take on that call, ready to put in that time. In terms of retention, it makes me wonder, are there clients that maybe haven't reached back out or anything along those lines because they connected with somebody that was maybe a little softer touch, little, you
Yeah,
know,
well, in our worlds, our
yeah,
collective worlds, I mean, attorneys, family law attorneys is no different. We're like ants. There's a
right,
lot of firms and a lot of attorneys, so there's a lot of competition. And now with it just being right there on your phone and just ever present, I mean, if they're calling you, they're calling 10 other people.
mm-hmm,
And it just what I have found in comments from folks just time and time again is that initial touch and getting them to someone that actually talks to them and can actually answer their questions makes the difference in a big way. Because a lot of for business reasons, I mean, a lot of divorce firms or family law practice firms, that's how they filter through these calls. They'll put them with just a call intake person
right,
or a paralegal in their office. And look, my paralegals are amazing, but that's just that initial touch. It's not the same as if they're talking to the attorney.
right,
And another thing, we still do, to the chagrin of a lot of my similarly experienced and credentialed colleagues, I'll put it that way,
yep,
still do free consultations.
okay,
I decided to do that from the very beginning. It ruffled a lot of feathers among my similarly credentialed colleagues
right,
out there who asked me to stop doing it, but I just kept doing it, and I feel like it's my way of a service for people who come in and to give them that touch and that feel. And we've gotten a lot of referrals out of that, because people who I couldn't help for whatever reason, but I spent the hour, or the 50 minutes or an hour 20 or whatever, really going over with them in detail, what could be done or what can't be done. And if they can't afford it, I get it. I
right.
understand that. But to take the time and treat them as a person in need and a lot of times feeling like they're in crisis, it just makes a difference. It's just that human touch.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
in the food and beverage industry, they call that the free sample, right? But I like
Excuse
that. I
me.
mean, again,
Yeah.
you've literally got me thinking like, huh, that's an interesting thought that like having, having somebody that knows what they're doing. And again, I'm thinking about all the people that are watching this that, relating it to their business. And I would envision that you're right. Either the phone call or that initial touch is going to the business owner themselves, or they're thinking about delegating it out to like almost a call center, which that doesn't check the box
Yeah.
because then it's just like, hey, what can we do for you? They're taking notes, and then hey, we'll have Jimmy call you.
And that's a no-no,
Right.
right? Because internally in the office, when I have staff try to commit me to something,
Hmm.
and they're just trying to protect me, right?
Right.
But they'll say, "Hey, I'll have Jimmy call you this afternoon."
Mm.
And for whatever reason, if we don't connect and I don't know to call that person and
Right.
meet that commitment, that's a no-no. And
Right.
so in the office, I try very, very hard if someone has tried to commit me to doing something like that to make sure I have to stop, drop, and roll and call that client and make sure we meet that commitment.
Hmm.
I think we do a pretty good job of that. It is a very rare complaint in my office that communication or the lack of communication is an issue. Because I emphasize that rule in my office. Even if we have bad information to relay, we need to be relaying that information. If we have good information, relay it, but communicate, because that's definitely the number one complaint that clients have is, their attorney, not just their paralegal, doesn't communicate very well with them. And so, and oftentimes I'll even offer clients, maybe it's another way, now that I just thought about it, I offer my clients non-billable, what I call mental health checks.
Okay.
I'll just tell them, hey, look, I don't bill for everything.
Hmm.
If you want to just have a mental health, a head check in, or
Yep.
just make sure your head's in the right space, and just ask me, or I'll text the client and say, hey, I'm just checking in with you. No, not billing, just
I would
checking
think
in.
that would probably make your job a lot
It
easier.
goes a long ways, and in the end, it makes it a lot
Right.
easier because it helps people stay in the right lane, right, and not
Yeah.
overreact, because the overreactions
Post
is
something crazy on social media.
or whatever it is, or react the wrong way, but it causes a lot of chaos and problems, So yeah, that's yeah.
So we were kind of talking about new business. We talked about what you feel is the big thing that's helping you now. Is there anything that you're doing that you were doing earlier on when you were kind of newer, right? That, not, I don't want to hear about a mistake, but like, is there anything that you were doing early on that you were like, hey, this was really working, but then I was able to kind of leverage this and I don't have to do that anymore? Hypothetically,
Yeah, no, I have a very real answer to that.
Fantastic.
People watching, it's hard to get to know me. But I came to family law with an enormous amount of trial experience, and I came to this practice from a Spanish speaking practice. I think I've told you this personally before. Oh, well, I started here in Travis County. We built a Spanish speaking law practice.
Okay.
At one time, I was bilingual and fluent in Spanish, and
Very
there were
cool.
two of us. We called ourselves the Los Abogados Güeros, which was basically the white guy lawyers who speak Spanish.
Okay.
And we did criminal defense, and eventually merged that into immigration. My former partner, who now still does, Jeff Peak, who still owns the business now.
Shout out to Jeff Peak.
Shout out to Jeff Peak. He's a good dude, good attorney. He's
Cool.
now board certified in immigration law. I refer stuff to him as much as I can. And then we eventually started doing family law. And in the partnership, I raised my hand and said, I'll do it. I mean, because I had no experience in it. But I used to be a prosecutor in Fort Worth and Tarrant County, and I came to this world with, I don't know, 88, 90 jury trials. I mean, a lot of courtroom experience. So my living room was the courtroom.
Okay.
And so when I was doing the family law stuff initially with the Spanish practice, the beginning to the answer to your question is I took everything to court.
Okay.
And they were flat fee cases. We weren't dealing with hourly rates and all that. And so I wanted to see what would happen. I wanted to go learn in the courtroom. And
Instead of settling, you mean?
Yeah, and it didn't earn me friends.
Sure.
I mean, for sure. And, but I knew that if somebody was going to beat me, they'd beat me once. Right. And I told other attorneys at the time, I mean, you're going to, if you beat me, fine. Because they would tell me and, jaw at me or whatever. Because I was young and cocky and all that. And,
sure.
And I just said, well, you'll beat me once. That's fine. But what I was doing was learning the outer bounds of what judges liked or were comfortable with. And how it would play out in the courtroom, what evidence was relevant, what wasn't. And I mean, for a good 4 years, that's what I did. I took almost everything I possibly could to court, even if I probably should have settled it. And I apologize to people in the past, but, fortunately, this is like 20 years ago or 18 years ago. But, man, that was very, very rewarding in terms of experience because now I've got 14 jury trials in family law, lots and lots of mediations and hearings and, trials in front of the judges. And not only did I get to know the judges, but I got to know the intimate workings of family law and probably more importantly, how it plays out in the courtroom.
Sure.
So like what you were talking about a while ago, like if the shoe drops and all of a sudden the fight's on when we thought it wasn't, I can pretty well tell you, better than the pollsters out there within a plus or minus of a couple of points, what's going to happen. Because I have that very real experience in front of our judges. And so to button up the answer to your question is what happened eventually is that for whatever reason, that ended up earning a type of reputation. I don't know if it's good, bad, or indifferent. But at some point, my cases started settling a lot more.
Right.
And I started being able to have better dialogue one-on-one with the other attorney, where instead of them, just talking down to me, I started talking with them.
Yep.
And some of the better attorneys and more experienced attorneys, because frankly, there was a period of time in my history where I don't do this anymore for people watching, but if there was a super lawyer on the other side or someone that was board certified on the other side, I wanted their case. I didn't care if I took $1 or $1,000 or $10,000 as the retainer, because I wanted to see if they were that good.
I see.
because I knew in the courtroom I could do it. I just didn't have those credentials yet.
Sure.
And so, so there was a period of time where I called it, I was scalping. Like
Right.
if that attorney was on the other side and they had those credentials, I took that case.
So doing things
You
a
know.
little more the harder way, but you learn
Well,
from
but it
that.
wasn't harder
Right.
because I was comfortable in the courtroom. I
Mhm.
mean, and so, but that was my education that today my clients benefit from. And that's really one of the distinguishing factors of my firm. I mean, I can, with that much experience in the courtroom, you can really give people real advice. And that's one thing that distinguishes an attorney like myself. And I'm not trying to just brag on me. I'm just saying
No,
that
do it.
distinguishes, like if people are looking for a family law
Sure.
attorney versus somebody who's been out, say, 6 or 7 years. I mean, they may have some years of practice under them, but the real question is how often have they gone and actually made it happen in court?
Right.
And where somebody has looked at the situation and the odds are completely against you, and they went and pulled a rabbit out of a hat in the
Mhm.
courtroom. Like they worked the circumstances, they worked their evidence, they worked the situation, and actually turned it around. And that's the reputation that I started earning over the years.
I
And
gotcha.
so that makes a big difference.
And
Yeah.
then as far as, new clients are concerned, is there anything that you're doing advertisement wise, anything along those lines that you feel works, or is it really just kind of doing all the things we've described?
Well, we have a strong SEO presence.
Okay.
Our website, I'm proud of our website. It's informative. I like to think of it. I didn't.
What's the website's address?
So it's evansfamilylawgroup.com. Was
Okay.
I supposed to say that?
Yeah. We'll,
And
we'll cut it in, make it all pretty.
I pride myself on the website being informative. I didn't want it to be a marketing piece like you see a lot of these websites. So I tend to pride myself on the fact that you can go there and actually learn information. We're in the process of working, hopefully, with a podcast company like this, where
Sure.
we can actually start adding video content to add to that. And so we're looking forward to doing that here in the next 6 months or so. So people
Well,
will
we'd be
actually have-
happy to help you out here.
well, we'll take it. So that's probably the biggest thing.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Well, to switch it a little bit to the lending side of things, one of the things I've got to get out is a public service announcement. And I know that you know this because we've talked about it, but it just fits really well with everything we're doing. One of the things that I run into on a semi-regular basis is attorneys that are under the impression that when you've got individuals that are currently on the same mortgage, so you've got a joint mortgage account, Bob and Sally bought a house and fell in love and they both go on the mortgage loan together and 10 years goes by and they decide that it's just not working out. They meet with the family planning attorney and they get all of the paperwork drafted up. The number one thing that I see that is very, very scary to me when I see it is I'll see situations where someone will sign off on a quitclaim deed
Oh yeah.
without getting the refinance or even getting it in writing that the refinance needs to take place. And I know you're not doing that, but shockingly, I see that from a lot of family planning attorneys. And the reason why that's bad is because if you sign off on a quitclaim deed, even if you and your soon-to-be ex agree that, she's going to keep the house and I'm not, that doesn't take you off of the responsibility of the financing.
Right. Let's flip this around and let me be the interviewer for a second,
Yeah.
right? Because this is where yours and my world definitely intersect.
Right.
So we have a couple that mutually or co-own, and not only in title, and sometimes the title doesn't matter, right? It's the mortgage.
Yeah.
But let's say they co-owned in the deed, but they're also jointly on the mortgage.
Right.
It's the most common question I get. Because somebody's being awarded that house or that property in the divorce or
Yep.
or a settlement, is how do I get that other spouse's name off the mortgage?
Yeah.
Says
Well,
you.
and here's the problem with that right now is that people, typically refinanced or bought within the last like 3 to 5 years. So they've got a rate with, something in like a 3 or 4 in front of it
Or two.
or 2.
Yeah.
And we are definitely not in that, we're not in that space rate wise here, August 17th, 2023. And so what people try to do is they, typically if we require, the short answer is it requires a refinance.
Right. Or a sale.
Or a sale. And so, if interest rates are comparable to what they have or they're even lower, then the refinance is, they're happy to do it, right? We're running into this a lot lately, though, because people don't want to give up that 3% or 2% interest rate and trade it out for like a 6 or a 7.
That's legit.
And they're kicking and screaming, going, well, what can we do? Can we contact the current servicer? Is this loan assumable, for example?
Are you seeing assumable loans?
Well, so the only loans that are assumable are going to be government loans that are going to be FHA or VA,
VAs are the ones that I see.
and even if VA, it has to be assumed by another veteran.
Right.
So really, it's only FHA, and those loans are assumable. So if you are lucky enough, not lucky, but if you do have an FHA loan and you're in a divorce situation, I mean, absolutely, right now you would want to take advantage of the assumption of the FHA loan. However, FHA loans, when you're buying, are not as sought after. So when you purchased your home originally, you did not want an FHA loan.
And
You
why is
certainly,
that? So your listeners
yeah.
benefit